It was one of those nights when you feel like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I still can't explain it fully, but there's a certain kind of energy in the air that tells you something isn't right. I want to share a story with you, one that still haunts me to this day. A story I can't forget no matter how hard I try. It's a story about a night I'll never be able to shake off, and a place I'll never visit again. Was it a dream or a horrifying reality? I don't know, but I know this. We were lucky to have made it out alive. Let me start from the beginning. 15 years ago, my family and I decided to go on a road trip through the Appalachian Mountains. Emma, my wife, and I had talked about doing it for years, but life always seemed to get in the way. Between work, taking care of our house, and raising our son Jake, it was hard to find the time for a getaway. But Jake had been asking for months to visit some of the old historic sites and natural wonders that the Appalachian region had to offer. So with summer finally here and the opportunity presenting itself, we packed up the car and set off on our adventure. We had planned to spend a couple of days in Asheville, North Carolina to explore the town and enjoy the nearby trails, and then head east towards the mountains, stopping at small towns along the way. But after a few days in Asheville, we decided to change our plans. We were near the foothills of the Appalachian Range and felt the urge to venture deeper into the wilderness, to explore the places less traveled, to find something out of the ordinary. We were ready for a true adventure, a break from the ordinary, a journey into the unknown. We had no idea how true that would turn out to be. By the time we were ready to leave Asheville, it was already 8 p.m. The sky was darkening, and we had an entire evening ahead of us to drive towards the small town of Hollowbrook, located deep in the mountains. The GPS said it would take us about 2.5 hours, but the mountain roads weren't exactly the smoothest. There was something oddly captivating about the place, though, a sense of peace mixed with a strange foreboding. "I heard it's beautiful up there," Emma said as she glanced at the map. "We'll be there before midnight, right?" "I think so," I replied, trying to shake off the feeling that was creeping over me. "It's just the mountain roads, they might slow us down." Jake, our 12-year-old son, was bouncing in his seat, excited to see something new. "Are we there yet? I want to see the mountains," he said, his face pressed against the window, eyes wide with anticipation. The drive was long and winding, the narrow mountain roads barely wide enough for our car. The headlights cut through the thick darkness ahead, casting shadows over the dense forest on both sides of the road. It was the kind of place where you could easily imagine something lurking just beyond the beam of light. About an hour into the drive, the road started to twist more sharply, and the trees grew taller and denser. There was something unnerving about the way the night seemed to swallow up the world around us. No houses, no signs of life, just an endless stretch of roads surrounded by towering trees. The kind of place you'd expect to find in the stories your grandparents told you about when they warned you not to wander too far into. The woods. "Let's take a break at the next gas station," Emma suggested. "I need to stretch my legs." "I'll keep an eye out," I said, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. The road felt increasingly isolated, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were too far from civilization. It wasn't long before we saw a gas station ahead, barely visible in the dim light. It looked old, run down, and isolated, the kind of place that seemed stuck in time. The flickering neon sign above the pump buzzed erratically. I pulled into the station, and we got out to stretch our legs. As I filled the tank, I noticed that the station had a small convenience store attached to it. A single light flickered inside, casting long shadows across the pavement. I thought about going inside to buy a snack or a drink, but something made me hesitate. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, her voice slightly trembling as she came up behind me. "Yeah," I said, but even as I spoke, I felt a strange unease settle over me. "I think we should get back on the road. Something doesn't feel right here." "Okay, let's go." She didn't argue, and we quickly piled back into the car. It wasn't long after we left the gas station that the car started sputtering. The engine coughed, and I could feel the car lose power. The fuel gauge was still showing half a tank. Confused, I pulled over to the side of the road. "Maybe we should turn back," Emma said, her voice edged with concern. "Something's wrong." "I'll check it out," I said, stepping out of the car and popping the hood. I checked the engine, but everything seemed fine. It wasn't the engine. There was something else, something strange. It was as if the car simply didn't want to go forward. I was about to get back into the car when I noticed a faint light in the distance. It was a small flicker, too far to be a house, but close enough to make me curious. "Maybe it's a town or another gas station," I said, trying to reassure Emma. "Let's go see if someone can help." We gathered our things, locked the car, and started walking toward the light. The forest was even denser here, and the shadows seemed to stretch out endlessly. It felt like we were walking deeper into a void, and the closer we got to the light, the more the air seemed to grow heavier. When we finally reached the source of the light, we were stunned to see an old, abandoned inn. It looked like it had been there for centuries. The wood was worn and the windows were cracked, but there was still light coming from inside. I knocked on the door, and after a moment it creaked open. An elderly man greeted us. He was dressed in a long coat and had a rugged look about him. His face was weathered and his eyes were sharp, though his smile seemed welcoming. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "My name is Sam. Welcome to the Hollowbrook Inn. You're lucky to have found it. Not many people make it this far. We're having some trouble with our car," I explained. "Could we maybe spend the night here? We'll leave first thing in the morning." Sam didn't hesitate. "Of course, you're welcome to stay, but I must warn you, don't go outside after midnight. There are dangers out there." We looked at each other, confused. "What kind of dangers?" Emma asked. "The kind you don't want to meet," Sam replied, his smile fading slightly. "But don't worry, you'll be safe inside. The inn has always protected those who come seeking shelter." I wasn't sure what to make of his words, but at that point it didn't matter. We were exhausted, and the inn seemed like the only place we could find refuge. Sam showed us to a room that was simple but clean. It felt strangely warm considering the chill in the air outside. We tried to relax, but the atmosphere in the inn felt off. It was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Jake quickly fell asleep, exhausted from the long journey. Emma and I stayed awake a little longer, talking in whispers. But as the clock struck midnight, we felt a sudden sharp coldness creep into the room. Suddenly there was a loud knock on the door. Startled, I jumped up and opened it, but no one was there. I stepped out into the hallway only to hear something that made my blood run cold. The sound of something or someone scratching at the walls. I shut the door quickly and bolted it. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, her face pale. "What was that?" I couldn't answer. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel something pressing against the walls, something trying to get in. Then came a terrible scream, a woman's voice, filled with raw, gut-wrenching terror. We both froze. The scream echoed through the walls of the inn, and then there was silence. I looked at Emma. "We need to stay inside." Sam was right, but it was too late. By the time the sun rose, everything had changed. The next morning, we awoke to find the inn eerily quiet. There was no sign of Sam, no trace of anyone. The inn looked abandoned. We hurriedly packed our things and went outside, but the world outside had shifted as well. The inn had vanished. The trees around us were different, as if they had grown overnight. And when we looked back at the spot where the inn had been, there was nothing but an overgrown field. A local shepherd appeared out of nowhere, walking with his flock. When we told him about our experience, he smiled knowingly. "The inn? You've been there, haven't you? It's been gone for years. The spirits of Sam and his wife still protect travelers, but sometimes it's too late." His words left us in shock. The inn, the people, it was all a memory, a part of the past. But they were still there, protecting those who got too close. We never spoke of that night again, but it stays with me. Sometimes I think about the spirits of the Hollowbrook Inn. watching over the lost travelers, ensuring they never find their way back.